On the night of January 13, 2012, a 114,000-ton cruise ship was lying on its side off a small Italian island, and nobody aboard had been ordered to abandon it yet. More than 4,000 people were aboard a ship that had already lost propulsion, was listing severely, and was filling with seawater. The ship had every modern safety system available, and it had struck the rocks because someone chose to be there. This is the structural autopsy of the Costa Concordia disaster. The Costa Concordia was 7 years old, flagged in Italy and operated by Costa Crociere on Mediterranean cruise routes. That night, she carried 3,206 passengers and 1,023 crew, a total of 4,229 people, on a Western Mediterranean itinerary. Her scheduled route did not pass close to Isola del Giglio, a small rocky island in the Tyrrhenian Sea west of Tuscany. Captain Francesco Schettino deliberately deviated from the approved route to bring the ship on a close pass of Giglio, a practice known in maritime culture as a salute. Schettino stated the deviation was a traditional salute. Prosecutors argued he was sailing close to shore to impress a younger woman who was present on the bridge, though that motive was disputed in court and not proven. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. A ship the size of a skyscraper on its side was now aimed at a shallow rock formation in the dark. The ship was traveling at approximately 15.5 to 16 knots as it approached Giglio, through poorly lit waters at night, and along a route it was not authorized to enter. The Scole rocks lie at the southeastern tip of Giglio, submerged granite formations that do not announce themselves in the dark. At approximately 21:42 local time, the port side of the Costa Concordia met those rocks at speed. The collision tore open the port side hull. Estimates from maritime investigators placed the gash at between 165 and 230 feet in length, the variation reflecting different measurement methods across hull sections. That breach was not at the waterline. It ran through the lower hull, directly adjacent to the ship's engine and mechanical compartments. At 16 knots, the rocks entered the hull with enough force to create immediate and uncontrollable flooding. Water entered the engine rooms and the ship lost electrical power and propulsion. She became, in technical terms, dead in the water. Without propulsion, the ship could not be steered away from the island, and without power, her stability management systems were compromised. The ship began listing, tilting to one side, and that list would only deepen as water continued to pour through the open hull. Passengers filming from inside the ship recorded the moment the lights went out, and then an announcement that described the problem as an electrical fault. The ship was taking on water through a catastrophic breach. Passengers were told initially to return to their cabins. That instruction, in the minutes following a major hull breach, placed thousands of people further from the lifeboats. Sources indicate that distress signaling and the formal declaration of an emergency were delayed by more than an hour after impact, though the precise interval is not consistently documented across all available records. Every minute the emergency was not declared was a minute Coast Guard. Rescue assets were not moving toward the ship, and every minute the ship listed further, making the lifeboat stations harder to reach and harder to operate. Cruise ship lifeboat davits are engineered for a level or near-level deck. Once the list exceeds safe operating tolerance, deployment becomes physically dangerous. On the port side, the low side of the list, boats swung inward toward the hull instead of outward toward the water. On the starboard side, or on the high side, boats hung far from the hull surface, requiring people to climb or jump to board them. Despite those conditions, the evacuation that followed was, in statistical terms, one of the largest and most successful maritime rescues of the modern era. 4,194 people were rescued over approximately 6 hours, the primary evacuation window, with Coast Guard, naval, and local vessels all involved. The scale of what went right is not the subject of this autopsy. It is what makes the 32 deaths harder to dismiss. 32 people died, 27 passengers and 5 crew members, all by drowning, either aboard the ship or after entering the water during the chaotic evacuation. Not one of those deaths was caused by the hull breach itself. Every one of them happened during the hours that followed. At some point during the evacuation, while approximately 300 people were still aboard, Captain Schettino left the ship. Schettino later claimed he fell into a lifeboat and did not deliberately abandon the vessel. Prosecutors disputed this, with one official stating he reached land without even getting his feet wet. The Coast Guard audio recording of the exchanges that followed was played in court and became one of the defining pieces of evidence in the trial. Coast Guard Captain Gregorio De Falco ordered Schettino to return to the ship and take command of the evacuation. Schettino refused. The legal obligation of a ship's captain to remain aboard until all passengers are evacuated is not an informal tradition. It is codified in maritime law. Schettino's departure left the remaining passengers and crew without unified command during the most dangerous phase of the evacuation. The ship eventually capsized and settled on its side against the rocks, and the search for victims continued long after the last survivor was ashore. The last body was not recovered until November 2014, nearly 3 years after the disaster, found during the salvage operation. That fact, a body inside an inaccessible wreck for nearly 3 years, measures the physical scale of what the collision produced. The trial of Francesco Schettino ran for 19 months, beginning in July 2013. In February 2015, he was convicted of multiple counts of manslaughter, causing a shipwreck and abandoning ship. The court sentenced him to 16 years in prison, 10 for manslaughter, 5 for causing the wreck, and 1 for the act of abandonment, against a prosecution request of 26 years. Italy's Court of Cassation, the highest criminal tribunal, upheld the conviction on appeal. 4 crew members and 1 Costa Concordia official received shorter sentences through plea bargains, having accepted responsibility for specific roles in the disaster. The wreck itself was righted in a single unprecedented operation in September 2013, a procedure called par-buckling, never before attempted at this scale. The hull reached Genoa in July 2014. Dismantling continued until July 2017, bringing the total wreck removal effort to an estimated $1.5 billion, thus about $2 billion at the time. One of the largest and most expensive maritime salvage operations ever attempted. Structural autopsy, primary mechanism, a deliberate and unauthorized course deviation, placed a 114,000-ton vessel at speed over submerged rocks at night, producing a hull breach of up to 230 feet that flooded the engine rooms and eliminated propulsion. Progressive failure. Stage 1. The captain directed the ship off its approved route and reduced the safety margin between the hull and the Scole rocks to 0. Stage 2. Impact created uncontrollable flooding. The ship listed and lost propulsion, while passengers were initially told the problem was electrical. Stage 3. An unverified but reported delay of more than 1 hour in declaring an emergency compressed the time available for safe lifeboat deployment on a worsening list. Contributing failures. Standard lifeboat deployment was degraded by the ship's list. Chain of command was broken when the captain left the vessel before the evacuation was complete, and distress signaling that should have mobilized rescue assets immediately was delayed. Human consequence: 32 people drowned, 27 passengers and 5 crew, all in the hours after impact, while 4,194 others were rescued. The last victim was not found for nearly 3 years. Final finding: the Costa Concordia did not fail because a system broke. It failed because the person responsible for the system decided to operate outside it and then refused to manage the consequences. When leadership is the safety system and that leadership fails, no engineering on the ship can substitute for it.